Hello, everyone. And you know how every once in a while you find a movie that you've never heard of, and then you try to look for it online, and you realize that it doesn't even have a lot of reviews. Like IMDb has like no reviews of the movie. But then you watch it and you go like, wow, this is way better than I'd expected. And that was my experience watching A Legend of Turmoil, a Japanese Yakuza movie from 1992. And because I was in the mood to watch another Yakuza movie, I ended up watching Japan Organized Crime Boss from 1969, which was like okay, but they both kind of have very similar plots. I'm guessing because they both are from the same studio, which used to make a lot of Yakuza movies. So I figured, you know what? Let's talk about both of them. Okay, so to start with, like this time I took down some notes because the movies being Japanese, I knew that I wouldn't remember all the names. So I'll start off with some of the details, right? So Japanese Organized Crime Boss is from 1969, directed by the great Kinji Fukasaku, who is known more famously for the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series from the 70s. And he also directed, like his last film was Battle Royale. So if you have seen Battle Royale, you've seen like, at least some of Kenji Fukasaku's work. Okay, the movie stars Koji Surata as the main hero. I don't remember his name. It also stars Bunta Sugawara, who later on sort of went on to be the lead character in the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series. And in a fairly different role, you get Shintaro Katsu, who used to play Zatoichi in all the 60s and 70s Zatoichi films. So it was fun to see him in like a Yakuza movie instead of like the usual samurai stuff. Okay, on the other hand, you have A Legend of Turmoil, which is from 1992. So this was directed by Akiyoshi Kimata and it stars Akira Kobayashi. This was his final film. Like he's still alive, but this was the last film that he worked on. Like since then, he's pretty much retired. I think he plays golf now. The movie also has, in like a very minor role, it has like Beach Takeshi, who sort of shows up for like a 2-minute scene. So it was just interesting to see Beach Takeshi in like just randomly showing up, and also stars like Ruby Moreno. All right, so to start off with, let's talk about the plots of the movie because they're kind of similar but also a little different. They're sort of like similar but opposite. Okay, like a lot of the things that happen are almost similar in both films, but the way they sort of go about it is different. Okay, so with Japan Organized Crime Boss, I should just call it like JOCB. So this was actually the first of 4 movies. So in Japan, they're called something else. They're called like Japan's Violent Gang. So they're like 4 movies. There's like Japan's Violent Gang's Boss, and then Boss and Killers, Degenerate Boss, and the last one is called Loyalty Offerings. Like, I'll see if I can find all of them, but yeah, the first one is kind of okay. Okay, so plot wise, right? So with JOCB, like Japan Organized Crime Boss, the movie sort of where it starts off in like very standard Kinji Fukasaku, Yakuza movie fashion, which is, if you ever seen any of his movies, they always start off in like documentary style, right? So he does like this, he gives you like an overview of what is happening. 戦後の混乱期、闇市や盛り場を中心に繁殖した数々の暴力集団は So in this one, you find out like there is a gang called the Dano family, and they've already sort of taken over Osaka, and now they're sort of like spreading out to other parts of the country. And that general MO, which is sort of very clever, is that they come to a new city and then they team up with like a local Yakuza gang, and they get that gang to do all the fighting against everyone else. So if anyone gets arrested, it's people from that gang, or if anyone gets killed, it's people from that gang. And then when everything is over, like Dano then just moves in and takes over everything. So they remain sort of unscathed, right? Like none of their people die. So which is very clever. So when the movie starts, they've already sort of like captured like a few cities and are now sort of moving closer to Tokyo. So in order to do that, they've now sort of tied up with this local gang called the Sukarada family. And the hero is like the second in command of the Sukarada family, which is also very similar to a Legend of Turmoil, because in that also the hero is like the second in command of the gang. Okay, so we start off and the hero is sort of just getting out of prison after like a 8-year sentence.
ちょうどその頃、浜中組大菓子塚本哲夫が8年の刑を終えて出所してきた。
And as he's sort of, walking down, getting close to his gang, he sees that his gang is already in a fight. So he sort of helps them out, and then he comes back to the headquarters. And then as he's talking to his junior, played by Bunta Sugawara, you hear like this explosion, and you find out like, someone's bombed their boss's car. Okay, like someone threw like a stick of dynamite in there.
まあ親分には親分の考えがあってのことでしょうから、その辺のところは直接。
And they manage to get the boss out, but he's dying. So, but as he's dying, he tells the hero, like, look, I really screwed up. Like, this whole deal with that I've made with the Dano family is not a very smart idea. So, if we have to survive, like, you have to get us out of it. And then he dies. So the hero takes over, and then the rest of the movie is him just trying to, maintain peace. Like, he doesn't want to go to war, and he also doesn't want to fight with the Dano family anymore. But the Dano family is not interested in that, right? So the Dano family then approaches, Zatoichi, I'll say Zatoichi, but they approach like his gang, which is like these bunch of crazed, doped out fiends, and even like Zatoichi's character. Like the reason why he's fun to watch is because he plays like this completely doped out guy.
宮原和義の率いる北竜会であった。
And they sort of get him to work with them and says, you know what, we'll give you this entire port area. In return, you just, help us take care of whatever. And they also keep sort of poking, the hero's gang into trying to get into a fight, but he doesn't want to. So that becomes like, the rest of the movie, like him trying to sort of maintain peace, but sort of failing at it because no one else is interested in that. So that's the plot of JOCB. Now coming to Legend of Turmoil, it's sort of slightly different, but kind of similar. Because I think because Toei Films used to do a lot of Yakuza movies, they had like a very standard sort of blueprint for all Yakuza films. So you could pretty much just, make one every few months and just release it. So with Legend of Turmoil, we start off in this small Japanese city, which has like a lake, and there's going to be like this giant sort of reclamation project. So this very large construction company, or probably like the largest construction company in this city, is the one that's going to be in charge of, doing all the construction work. So when the movie starts, it opens up in like this hotel room, and there's this old man who's dead in bed, and there's this young woman who's sort of crying on the floor. And then, our hero, who is like the second in command of this Yakuza gang, which is working with the construction company. They're called the Kasabe Union. And they sort of show up and they realize like, okay, just dress up the dead man, pay off the mistress. And you find out that the man who's died is actually the boss of the construction company. So the next day you have the funeral, and then the Kasabe Union shows up at the funeral. The son is there, the construction company boss's son. And you realize that the son doesn't like this gang anymore. Like, they're a very small gangs, but he has like larger ambitions. So he wants to sort of get rid of them.
笠部からの花は断ると言っといたはずだ。
申し訳ありません。しかし先代の時は。
先代は先代。私には私のやり方がある。
So they get the hint. They're like, you know what, he doesn't want us here, so we should leave.
林さん、引き合いましょう。引っかを待たずにかい。せがれの小一郎のやつはうちの組からの花にもあんまりいい顔してませんよ。
But as they're leaving, they get attacked. Like someone tries to kill their boss, like Mr. Kasabe. So the rest of the movie, or at least for like a fairly large chunk, it becomes sort of like a mystery where they're trying to figure out like who is trying to attack. But the big difference is like unlike JOCB, these guys are not interested in sort of maintaining peace. They're like, if you're going to come after us, we're going to come after you the minute we figure out who is coming after us. Okay, and then sort of things just keep escalating. Like they kind of start figuring out like what is going on and who's coming after them. And turns out like it's much bigger than what they're expecting, but they're like, we're not backing down. So that becomes like the rest of the movie. So with both films, the big similarity is that they're both sort of fighting against like much larger enemies. With a case of Legend of Turmoil, it turns out to be like way bigger. Like you have the construction company, you have this very large Yakuza gang that they're going after, and even like the police is involved. So there's like a lot of stuff. With both films, sort of it ends disastrously for both of them because they're like they can't win this, like no matter what they do. Now the reason why Legend of Turmoil works, at least for me, and JOCB doesn't, is because with Japan organized crime boss, there is no real depth to it. Like you have some interesting characters. It's fun watching Zatoichi play like a doped out Yakuza boss. But there's no, like, everyone else is mostly just cannon fodder, like except for the hero and like Shintaro Katsu and one of the other guys. What Legend of Turmoil does really well is that the director sort of gives enough of a backstory or enough depth to the characters that you actually sort of feel bad when bad shit goes down. So with the hero, you get to meet his family, you meet his wife, and he has a daughter. And like they are worried about him, like they know what he does. Even the wife, I don't think is like the wife is also probably involved with some club where there are like girls and stuff, so she's also doing some sort of slightly shady stuff, but she's like worried about him, so you get that. And then he also has like a mistress who is from Philippines, like he's taking care of her family and sending money, so she's with him.
ごめんなさい。気がつかなかった。
So you get like enough of like his personal life that you at least have like something to go on with. With JOCB, like the hero gets a girlfriend, but like nothing much happens over there. Now along with that, with Legend of Turmoil, you also get to see like the personal lives of the other members of the gang, right? You have like this dinner scene where two of the Yakuza guys are sitting around, and one of them is like introduces his girlfriend. He's like I'm an orphan and she's an orphan as well. Like we met in school and we're hoping to get married.
これがきりたんぽっていうのか。
これ秋田の名物なんです。
あ、お前ら田舎同じなのか。
三江っつんですよ。一人娘で両親なくてばあちゃんに育てられたんですけど、そのばあちゃんも死んじまって、そんで俺頼りにここ来たんです。
And then you get this other really funny scene where like you have these three Yakuza guys from the same gang who are like one of them is sort of like complaining like I thought being a Yakuza would be cooler, and then he's sort of like panicking, like are we going to get into a war, like I don't want to die, like so you get stuff like that.
ってよ。もっとかっこいいもんだと思ってたんだけどよ。
なんだって捨てられてみろよ。単なる身元探しの道具じゃねえかよ。
どこの誰だか分かったらよ、戦争なんだ。
黙って引き下がるようなことはしねえだろうな。
坊主。俺死にたくねえよ、チキショー。
So when bad shit goes down, you have, you've seen enough of their personal lives that you actually sort of care if something happens to them. Okay, which is sort of like the big problem with Japan organized crime boss, because it has like no depth like at all. Which is not to say like Kinji Fukasaku doesn't know how to make Yakuza movies. Like he made much better Yakuza movies later on. But I think this being his first one, he's sort of still trying to figure out what to do. So that sort of, that makes a lot of difference. With Legend of Turmoil, I think because this is just, it's like following the blueprint that was set up by directors like Kinji Fukasaku. They sort of take that blueprint and then the director sort of adds a lot more to it to just give it more depth. Now, on the other hand, as far as like cinematography is concerned, Japan Organized Crime Boss is much better. Like Kinji Fukasaku is like a properly sort of cinematic filmmaker. Like also you can sort of make, when you watch the film, you can realize like, the budget is a lot bigger. So with Kinji Fukasaku, like he's sort of like the opposite of Akira Kurosawa in the sense that when he does action scenes, they're not like staged. They're completely chaotic. Like the camera is always like at a Dutch angle, like this way or that way. And then like lots of shaky cam, people running around, screaming, and like just complete and utter chaos. So he was like really good at that kind of stuff. And he was also someone who then influenced directors like William Friedkin. So you can see his influence in films like The French Connection. And then even from like a budget standpoint, like you can make out like JOCB has like a much larger budget. Like when the Dano family shows up to the funeral of the boss, when he gets killed, and you get like this, like they all show up from the airport and there's like this long convoy of like, 20, 30 cars, and then it reaches the funeral home and you got like 100 people getting out. So you can sort of make out from the framing itself, like, like they had money to hire like 100, 150 extras, like stuff like that. With the case of like Legend of Turmoil, you do get some nice shots every now and again. But from like a budget standpoint, it feels like a smaller budget film. And it also, like at times it also feels like this is like a made for TV movie. So this is not like a very high budget affair. Even though like it has like one ridiculously good action scene, towards like the later half of the film when the gang gets attacked. Like that's a really intense, like well-made action scene. With this one, you get like the usual stuff, but that's all like the documentary style stuff. You don't really get, like the one action scene that does happens off camera. The same thing happens in JOCB, like the gang gets attacked, but it happens off camera. So you never get to see it, which is so weird. Like with this one, they're like, this is like the centerpiece. So we're going to do this action scene and we're going to do it on camera. So that one is like excellent. Okay, so as far as recommendations are concerned, I would highly recommend watching A Legend of Turmoil. Like, this is a pretty obscure movie. Like, even as I said, like, there are no reviews for this on IMDb. Like, there are a couple of reviews on Letterboxd, but beyond that, there's like very little mention of this. But it is a genuinely well-made movie. As far as like Japan organized crime boss is concerned, not so much. Like if you want to watch a good Kinji Fukasaku like Yakuza movie, then you should watch like the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series. Like that is brilliant. This one is sort of one of his earlier sort of lesser works, so I wouldn't really recommend watching it. If you are interested like in the sense of where do I find these movies, look them up on Internet Archive. Like Internet Archive is like a great place to find like all kinds of obscure or even like non-obscure movies. Yeah, so watch Legend of Turmoil if you like gangster movies.